party. So kami yan ang announcement ng bagong partido ni Binay, kaya yung ilan sa mga barkada natin si Binay na doon, kaya Efren, mas masarap yan ang kape doon eh. Kay Vice President Binay, kaya yung ilang mga barkada natin si Binay na doon, no? Ang kanyang bagong partido ang pangalan ay KBL. KBL? Oo, kay Binay lahat. Ang bagong partido si Binay, kay Binay lahat. Eh, siyempre, yung idol naman ni President Eno, hindi mapayag siya. Kay Binay din siya.
Kay Bongbong lahat.
Kay Bongbong lahat naman.
Lahat-lahat na. Asa na.
Oo. Magandang mga muli sa iyo lahat at welcome you sa ating regular na Brodkaster Forum dito po sa Rapper Hotel, and this is brought to you by the Liga ng mga Broadcasters sa Pilipinas. So, nasa komisyon natin, hindi ko nakikita. Ngayon mga mukhang nakaibinay din. No, talagang kami. Ikaw tingin bakali, ba't wala kakaibinay ngayon? Si Direk Alamin mo siya, isa po sa mga direktor natin sa National Press. Salamat sa kanyang regular na presensya dito sa ating forum. At sa kanan din po siyempre ng lahat ng mga bisyanes ng Liga. Kami po muli ay nagpapasalamat sa inyong presensya ngayong umaga. Palit-palit ako ng Channel 4. Eh, mukhang matagal-tagal na namin na-miss dito.
Busy lang po.
Busy lang. Oo, busy lang sa... Ako pala, anniversary. Ganun yun.
October 24.
October 24, happy anniversary sa ating kaibigan.
Diaryo ko. Pastor, yung diaryo ko, Pastor.
Talukot-alis na maglilingkod
yung
sa bayan. Sa pamagitan ng radyo at sa television. Grabe. Alam na. Lingkod bayan. Oo, matalas. Tingin ka po sa television din eh. Pagka nagkawa ka ng fair, di ba? So, saan ka ganapin? Hindi ka pa nag-iimbita? Doon din sa dati? Sa Kaulun? Okay. Well, ang ating pumabisita ngayong umaga ay mula sa aking kaliwa. Hindi na natin kinaka-introduce ito sa kanan ng transport sector. Si Efren de Luna ng Alliance of Concerned Transport Organization, ACTO. Noong 1986, nung dumating ako ng Maynila, Efren de Luna na siya. Hindi nagbabago. Ang tsura eh. Batang-bata pa hanggang ngayon. Efren, laki sa kalsada. At magagamit sa kalsada. Baka ganun ang mangyayari. Pero kung sinuwerte siya noong 2010, ay maaaring sa kongreso na rin siya nag-iingay ngayon. Diba? Hindi lang siya sinuwerte. Baka 2016, paano ito rin? No? Ilang partners ng transport sector. Efren, good morning. Bumati ka muna. Ano ba? Diba? Okay.
Hello. Magandang umaga po at maraming salamat.
Thank you. Wala ka pa paunang balita muna sa transport? Good news?
Sa amin ay bad news eh.
Bad news na naman?
Oo, dahil sa hanay ng transport, wala namang binibigay ang ating pamahalaan para sa benefit. Pagpus ay yung phase out, yung na i-implement sa ngayon.
Phase out. Ano yan? Mawawala ba ang mga jeep na mga pasada? Kasi may bagong mga programa ngayon na magkakaroon ng electronic jeepney. Kaya na naghahamon kami na pwede ba isamang media kung magte-testing tayo, bakit tayo ng Baguio? Gamitin niyo yung mga e-jeep na yan.
Number one ay tayo naman ay naghahanap ng solusyon. Dahil ang gobyerno natin, wala namang iniisip na solusyon niya, kundi nanggagaling din sa amin. At bilang katunayan ay isa na sa mga pinipace out nila ay yung mga UV Express. Yung tinatawag na 13 years old model. At hindi naman nagkaroon ng tinatawag na consultation yun o tinatawag na tinignan natin kung yung model 13 years old above ay maganda. Wala silang classification kung bakit nila pinipace out. Kuminsan kasi yung 13 years old na model ay mas maganda pa dun sa bago dahil siyempre kapag yan kami nabubuhay, inalagaan yan. Kaya ginawa namin sa gobyerno dahil wala namang kakayahan para kami suportahan, 13 taong kaming naglingkod at hindi na naging obligasyon ng gobyerno na sila yung bumili ng sasakyan. Namuhunan kami ng mahigit 1 milyon tapos ay naging bahagi pa kami sa pagtulong na 3 tatlong pamilya ang nabubuhay sa isang unit. Pero ang nangyari ay lugar na may pagpatuloy namin ang aming hanap buhay ay nagkaroon ng batas na model pataas na phase out. Ngayon, gumawa naman kami ng pamamaraan na sinabi namin, o sige, huwag na ninyo kami problemahin, kami na maghahanap para magkaroon sila ng sasakyan. Ang inihingi na lamang namin tulong sa inyo ay pag nakakuha kami at ng sasakyan, ay hindi na sana, ay mabilis naman yung dokumento na maging magkaroon kaagad ng franchise. Kasi ang ginagawa namin dito, Lakay, ay yung dating franchise namin, kapag nakakuha kami ng bagong unit, yun din ang inalalagay namin para hindi dumadami yung unit.
Okay, bago nga magbago ito si Kapos dito, meron bang isang taon at mga 8 hanggang 9 na buwan ang aking administration? Ang transport sector ba, particularly sa inyong hanay sa akto may nakikitang magandang proyekto ba mula sa aking administration?
Wala na kami maasahan dun sa gobyerno. Kami na yung nag-aisip Katulad yung sinasabi natin na pagandahin ang transportation dito sa ating bansa. Nag-isip kami na ang lumalabas dito ay okay kami dun sa Egypt. Pero hindi kailangan na mag-open na new applicant. Yung mga lumang jeep, pwedeng palitan ng Egypt. Ngayon, ang project namin ngayon, hindi nanggaling sa government, magbibigay kami ng jeep, wala siyang babayaran, maghihintay na lang siya ng boundary, tapos yung driver, magiging swerduhan na. Kami privado magmumula yun, at ngayon ipinatutupad na yun. Kaya makikita natin sa pagdating ng panahon, dahil mayroon na rin phase out ang jeep, yung 15 years old model, ipi-phase out na yan. Kaya yung mga luma ng mga sasakyan, pinaghahandaan na namin, nabibigyan namin ng unit na wala silang ilalabas na pera.
Okay.
Ay pagpapatuloy ngayon yung aming kabuhayan.
Thank you, my friend. Mayaman ako yung mga questions ninyo, gentlemen. At samantala, nakikilala ko sa inyo, si Kabuts, medyo matagal-tagal na panahon na hindi natin nakasama dito. Si Kabuts, Professor Butch Valdez of the Save the Nation movement. Tama-tama naman, maingay na pinag-usapan ngayon. Ang emergency powers na ibibigay kay Pangulo Aquino dahil kinakailangan na masolusyonan yung nakaamba na problema natin sa kuryente, specifically pagpasok ng summer of next year. Butch Valdez, isa po sa mga advokasya nila ay yung paandarin na yung nandiyan nakatenga na napataan na nuclear power plant. Kasama by the way kami sa Liga din sa Save the Nation movement. Butch, thank you for joining us. Magandang umaga.
Magandang umaga sa iyo, Lakay, at lahat ng ating mga kasama dito sa media. At ipapasalamat naman ako na imbita ulit dito sa very prestigious press con.
At congratulations sa pala si Butch. 2 oras na napapahinggan sa DCSL, no? Alas
7 hanggang alas 9 every Sunday.
Alas 7 hanggang alas 9 every Sunday. Ang programa ay
Ang ating katipunan.
oo. Nung araw kasama namin si Butch sa DCSL Nawala na kami lahat doon, natuto pa rin siya. Ibig sabihin, mas matibay siya kasi sa amin. Anyway, Butch,
Yes.
what are your thoughts? Pinagdidibatihan yung emergency powers na yan. Ngayon, mapaguhin lang ang termino, pero emergency powers pa rin ang dati.
Yung napakalabo nitong minumungkahin ni Pilipina na mabigyan ng emergency powers si Noynoy Aquino dito sa problema ng elektrisidad, no? At sabi na magkukulang daw kasi kinakailangan daw bumili ng bagong generating capacity para nga maibsan ang kakulangan sa kuryente. Sa aming palagay, wala namang pumipigil talaga sa presidente na bumili ng additional generating capacity. At ang problema dito, pag bumili siya ng additional generating capacity, syempre, ang sasaludan yung consumer. At ang sinasabi nila, ito na naman ang gobyerno, ang sinasabi nila, ni Tetilla, na doon daw sa kanilang skema, hindi daw tataas ang electricity rates. Alam nyo po, pag meron kang in-import at may cost yan, kinakailangan ilipat mo yung cost sa ibang sa sasalo. Ang talagang sasalo nito yung consumer. Pero siguro kung hindi nila itataas ang cost of electricity, they might find ways how to increase the other aspects of our itong ating cost of living. Why? Saan po? Pwede nilang isakay yan dito sa mga oil price hikes at magkakausap-usap sila ng mga oil companies na sasabihin, oy, etong portion na ito sa amin yan, no? Ito yung papambayad namin para dito sa additional power that we had purchased. They can do that. They can do it in certain other ways. They can do it by increasing taxation, for example, in certain other areas. Mako-quantify nila. Magkano ba itong in-import natin na generating capacity? Dito natin isasakay. But ultimately, ang tatamaan nito, yung consumer. At accountant po ako So alam ko kung paano nilang lalaroin nito At magsisinungaling sila, sasabihin nila, hindi dadagdag ang cost of electricity. Pero pwede mong dagdagan yung other aspects at doon mo itatago. Again, pag tinago nila sa gasolina, for example, magiging kaaway na naman ng transport sector ang publiko, pero ang gobyerno parang wala sila dyan. And this is exactly what is happening right now. This is being done. If the president will be given a emergency power, ang dapat niyang gawin immediately is to suspend the implementation of the APIRA law. Kasi yung APIRA law ang nagbibigay sa pribado sektor ang generation, transmission at distribution of electricity. And since private sector ang nakahawak dyan, kaya nilang taasin at hindi umaangal ng gobyerno. The government does not intervene to protect the consumer. And they continue to bring this up. If they suspend the APIRA law and tell all of those members of the private sector to temporarily, since they're anyway, napakalaki ng kinikita ng mga yan. Lahat po ng mga privado sector sa energy sector, 200% ang kinikita nila sa rate of investment nila. 200%! Can you imagine? Bawasan lang nila yan ng isang taon lang man sana, malaking mababawas sa halaga ng kuryente at marami tayong masasalbang buhay ng Pilipino. That is what they should do. The other is to have an energy development program that includes, among other things, the nuclear power generation. Lahat po ng bayan ngayon, right now, as of now, there are 72 nuclear power plants around the world that are being constructed in just some countries. Pati po yung Bangladesh, meron na po silang pinaplanong 2 nuclear power plant. Tayo, 35 years nang nakatiwangwang yung ating nuclear power plant, ayaw pa rin natin paandarin. Brand new po yan. Huwag kayong maniniwala na sinasabing luma na yan at sira na. Hindi po. Pinuntahan na po ng mga inhinyero, maraming inhinyero na foreigner and our Philippine Institute of Mechanical Engineers, Electrical Engineers. And they made a written recommendation to the President that it is sound. They have scrutinized it. We need to change certain things. The computer has to be changed because it was analog at that time. Change it to digital system. Ganyan na po ang bago ngayon. Napakasimple lang po yan. In 2 months magagawa natin yan. In less than 18 months, that nuclear power plant can run. And it will solve all of our shortages right now, especially in Metro Manila area. Pero ayaw nilang gawin. For what reason? Up to now, we still don't know. And I don't think it is politics.
Hindi naman siguro kailangan ng emergency powers na para ma-operate yung bantanong power plant. Hindi na.
Hindi kailangan kasi ang nagpapigil niyan was an executive order of Corazon Aquino.
Okay.
You can open it up by an executive order of the President.
Alright. Bago natin pakilala ang ating ating susunod na bisita, si RustI Delizo. Gusto ko lang pong magitin ang pagdating ng ating chairman dito na Liga, si Mike Abe of DCR and of course DCRE. Isa sa mga director natin si Ronald Hota of Miss World Festival Queen, malapit na rin Kinunsan. At by the way, gusto ko lang pasalamatan din ang KITV dahil sa tayo po ay Tatos Live at nag-broadcast sa KITV sa YouTube, tama? O sariling streaming YouTube at saka
Sa website.
so that tayo po ay mapapanood din po sa iba't ibang dako po ng daigdig. So ating pong next guest ay kakilala na ninyo, kasama sa grupo ng Sanlakas. Sila yung mga nasa 1 million people march na paraan sa Luneta. Siya po ay kasalukuyang political affairs officer ng Sanlakas. At nandito siya na kumakatawa naman sa Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. Ngayon ko na nalaman na meron pa ng grupo ganito rin, Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. Siya pa ang coordinator dito at nandito siya para ipaliwanag ko ano itong kanilang advokasya naman ng Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. Tama. Matapos ng talumpati ni Paolo Nilo sa Amerika. Naman siya natulog tayo lahat para magkaroon ng bawasan ng programa na ma-address itong problema natin sa climate change. Kasama natin si RustI Delizo. RustI, good morning.
Good morning, Lakay, and thank you very much for having invited me here. I'll very briefly share with you the position of the PMCJ, Philippine Movement for Climate Justice. As you know, the world's climate has been changing for the past 3 decades now, since the 1970s. And just recently, over the past 5 years, we've had, here in the Philippines alone, major damages wrought to our country by typhoons such as Ondoy, Sendong, Pablo, Haiyan, Yolanda, Linda, and recently Super Typhoon, Mario, if you may. Now, all of this is a result of the warming of the world's climate system. And the cause of the global warming is a result of overpollution, the heating up, and the trapping of greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas emissions, or GHG emissions, are the particles released into the atmosphere mainly from factories, from the industrial zones of the world. And these industrial zones are mainly located in the advanced capitalist countries. Now, in the terminology of the United Nations Framework on the Climate Change Conference, the UNFCCC or UNFCCC, the Annex 1 countries are the top leading GHG emitters worldwide. And the number 1 here is the US. And the UNFCCC also includes a panel of more than 1,800 scientists. This panel is called the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. There are some Filipino scientists here also, and over the past years, they have observed and studied, based on research data and scientific analysis, the continuing changing patterns worldwide. Their recommendations are quite comprehensive and many. Unfortunately, many governments who have prior commitments and obligations to cut down on the GHG emissions, like the US, unfortunately have not been doing so. In fact, the scientists are saying that we need to live within a carbon atmosphere of less than 1.5 degrees centigrade. Beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade, you will continue to heat up the world's atmosphere. And as the polar ice caps melt as a result, sea levels will rise. The Pacific Ocean, Atlantic, Indian Ocean, etc. And the low-lying nation island states in the Pacific or in the Philippines will be submerged, as we have already seen recently. Now, as a result of this, the Philippine Movement for Climate Justice has been calling on several demands, and I'll mention to you a few. An immediate, urgent, drastic, and deep-ranging cuts on all GHG emissions worldwide. We are holding the Annex 1 countries accountable to climate change. We are also demanding an end to public subsidies of private fossil fuel-based energy projects and corporations. We are also demanding that the Annex 1 countries fulfill their prior agreements and obligations to provide financial and technological support to developing countries such as the Philippines to build resilience. The Annex 1 countries are the rich industrial capitalist countries. The US, Japan, France, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, but not the Philippines or Bangladesh or Vanuatu or let's say Cambodia, etc. We also, okay, I'll explain it to you, Lakay. Yes, we can compel them. So we demand for immediate and urgent reparations for climate change damage worldwide. And this is the element or the aspect of climate justice. If we are the victims of climate change, then we demand justice, and reparations is part of the justice framework. Now, the problem is, Pinoy is now in the US. Less than 12 hours ago, or 12 hours ago, he gave a speech, 4 to 5 minutes long, very short, at the United Nations Climate Change Summit, organized by no less than the UN Secretary General himself, Ban Ki-moon. Now, unfortunately, if you took a look or listened to his speech, it totally deviated from the PMCJ position that we sent the Office of the President months earlier in preparation for his speech, and the demands we have been pushing for, even through press conferences and rallies. Now, Pinoy is saying, let's work together on climate change. Yes, that's correct. He's saying, let us stop the damages to countries like my country. Yes, that's correct. But he's not saying, cut down on greenhouse gas emissions and bring it down to a 1.5 degrees centigrade at a global level. He's not saying we need reparations from the rich countries to the poor countries so that we can capacitate ourselves for adaptation measures. He's not saying these things. He's not even saying that we need to shift to renewable energy sources or clean energy away from dirty energy sources or coal-based, fossil-based energy systems, because the coal-based systems only release more pollution into the atmosphere that only aggravate and accumulate greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. Now, we are saying in the PMCJ, and this is the last point, that the climate change policy of the Pinoy regime clearly remains incoherent before his UN trip, and especially today, after he spoke before President Obama and UNSG, Ban Ki-moon, and fellow world leaders. He continues to follow a business-as-usual approach. Large-scale mining continues nationwide, unabated. Violations of the Renewable Energy Act of 2008 continue to be implemented and manifested. The so-called local climate change action plans at the LGU level should be implemented nationwide. Until now, they have yet to be implemented. And lastly, up to now, the implementing rules and regulations, or the IRRs, of the People's Survival Fund, PSF, has yet to be developed and clearly stipulated. The PSF, People's Survival Fund, is a national buffer fund from the state to the LGUs badly affected by climate change damages so that they can cope up in terms of adaptation mechanisms. All this is a clear framework, and yet at the global and regional and national level and local levels, but yet Pinoy continues to bury his head in the sand and ignores the clear framework for climate change adaptive process and framework. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you. Rusty, pwede ba magtagalog kami yan?
Sure.
Palagay ko, yung mga inuubot sa mga physical na kagaya ni Pastor Jess, kagaya ko eh. Ano, epekto na ba ng climate change ito? Yung mga inuubot, saka mga dami mga sinisipon. Ano, gentlemen, may mga questions na kayo? Magsalita na initially itong ating mga samahan. Si Chairman and then si Keith.
Amen. Lawak ng usapan natin, climate change, saka power, no? Puro problema yan. Ang isipin natin, si Pinoy ang problema natin. Alam mo bakit? Nagsasalita siya doon sa New York tungkol sa climate change. Ang problema natin, yung mga empleyado ng National Risk Reduction and Management Council hanggang katapusan na lang sa sweldo. Walang perang ibinigay. Samantalang sila ang nakapront kapag nagkaroon ng kalamidad dahil ng climate change. So yung basic hindi na ibibigay. Tapos pupunta ka ng New York para magsalita about climate change. Stupid na statement yan. Inuinsulto sa mga Pilipino yan. Kaya pag tinanong ka ng media, ano ba preso ng Pilipinas? Wala namang masabi. Kasi ultimo mga empleyado, ano mo, Professor, yes sir, boss, Sir Valdez, yan ang problema natin eh. Parang din yung power. Dahil nagkukumawag tayo, emergency power, ganito, nandiyan yung power, ayaw naman lang gastusan, gamitin natin. Hindi yung climate change, ganyan. Ang climate change, problema ng mundo. Lahat ng bansa, naghahanda tayo, wala namang paghahanda. Yung empleyado mismo ng, ito, ano ulit ko, NDRH, wala na. Hanggang katapusan na, wala ng sweldo. Contractual, nasa disaster department. Sabi, paano kung tapos na yung kontrata, biglang nagkaroon sa disaster? Wala na magtatrabaho. Yan yung dapat bibigyan, yun ang inilalaban nyo dapat. Pinapaliwanag ko lang dito para magkaroon kayo ng information. Kasi pag sa media nang galing ka rito, sabi ng Malacanang, hindi, opposition yung media niyan. Hindi kami naniniwala yan. Isama nyo sa input nyo yan, isama nyo sa inyong laban para totoo na merong kayong, ibig sabihin, totoo na merong plano ang gobyerno. Wala talaga. Wala. Climate change, nandyan na. Walang tao, walang manpower. May nandyan na nga yung tao, hindi pa i-renew yung kontrata, wala na trabaho. Pag dumating ang kalamidad, nakanganga tayo lahat. Yun ba yung paghahanda natin sa climate change? Di ba kalokohan lahat yan? Nagpunta pa ng UN para lang sabi mag-bola doon, hindi naman totoo yun. Anyway, nabanggit ko lang kasi sabi mo nga bago-bago itong istorya. Ganito, itong climate change kasi, marami rin kumikita rito kasi. Di ba? Ang China at ang Amerika, negosyo na ito. Ngayon, tayo ay aliado ng Amerika, ng United Nations, paano tayo papakinggan? Kahit na tayo sumigaw ng sumigaw. So, anong nakikita niyong dahilan o paraan para huwag na tayo lumayo, dito na lang tayo gumawa ng paraan. Wala tayong maasahan sa mga yan. Kasi yung Amerika ang isa sa mga problema ng climate change. At saka itong dambuhalan China. So, kung ayaw nila, dead ba tayo lahat, patay talaga. So, sa tingin mo, dahil sa sinasabi mo talagang marami kang alam. Pero, ang gusto kong malaman, yung kaya niyong gawin, na dapat natin gawin, dito sa ating sarili bayan.
Those are very good questions. And now, if you will allow me to, I shall remove my PMCJ hat because it's a very limiting hat if I put it that
Parang ko
way.
na still nagtatagalog ako kanina.
Allow me to, you could speak to me in Tagalog, I understand it. I just speak in English. I grew up in Iran. But nevertheless, Lakay, let me say this. And my friend, Mike. Okay. This is an answer to you, Mike. My organization is Sanlakas. Some of you may know Sanlakas. We have a very broad and clear, comprehensive strategic framework. Now, our position is this. In relation to changes at the global level, this can only come about through a global mass movement. The peoples of the other countries changing their own governments. We also in the Philippines must do so. That is the reason why we cannot divorce the national change equation with the global change paradigm. Both must be linked. Therefore, we must be able to unite our efforts and our work at a global level. And this means changing the system on the basis of educating the masses, organizing them, and mobilizing them toward changing state power. Here in the Philippines, the Sanlakas position is this: patalsikin si Pinoy, labanan ang elitistang paghahari, itayo ang gobyerno ng masa. I'm now speaking as Sanlakas, not as PMCJ, because if we are to change the system, then we can only do so if we are in power, and if we are able to pursue our policies that are people-centered and rights-based and social justice-oriented. The Pinoy regime will never do so because of his class character and the interests around him. That's the reason why he's now in New York, blabbering his mouth with no content, no substance, no sense of direction. He's just there for poggy points, if I may. And yet his people here suffer. So how can we change? If we in the millions can organize ourselves, educate and raise our consciousness around the issues, not just climate change. I agree with Efren and Butch. All these are linked up. The power crisis is also directly linked to the climate change crises. For example, on the transport sector, the position of Sanlakas is scrap the oil deregulation law. That's the main root cause of the continuous spiraling of price hikes in the oil sector. For the APIRA, our position is scrap it because APIRA is part of the neoliberal macroeconomic policy framework that continues to provide for a rise in profits for the private-based power sector corporations versus the need for the use of energy by all. Now, this is the state policy that basically says, I am for private profit, but the majority of the people, you can suffer on your own. We cannot help you. That's the position that we in Sanlakas are raising beyond the PMCJ framework. Because the PMCJ framework only recognizes to a certain degree that unless the US, which is an imperialist country, and the other Annex 1 countries cut down on GHG emissions worldwide, the Philippines, even if we do our own homework, cannot change the typhoons that will continue to hit us, because this is a worldwide systemic problem already. But at the economic, social, and political levels, yes, we can also, to a certain degree, limited manner, change our direction toward a progressive agenda only if we change the system in the Philippines.
Okay, natanong ni Chairman Mike kanina, anong magagawa ninyo? Ang binanggit mo naman, parang ultimate solution yun eh. Talsikin na si Pinoy.
Yes, yesterday we had a rally outside the U.S. Embassy. Yesterday we had a rally outside the U.S. Embassy and the EU. And tomorrow we will hold a rally in front of Malacanang.
Okay. Sige, Kate. Mr. Kate. Yeah, Yuri.
Hello.
Yan.
Hello, climate change. RustI, tanong ko lang mag-i-English na ako lang konti lang ba ako eh.
Sino makisiran?
Kaya nabagit mo na ang source, main sources, na itong climate change or contributors ay mga kapitalistang bansa. But you failed to mention China, which is, I believe, the #1 contributor to air pollution. Ang mga pabrika doon sa China yung #1. Pangalawa, sinasabi mong parang pangunahan ng Pinoy ang pagpaniningil na reparasyon para sa Pilipinas. Ang tanong, kakayanin niya isang presidente na napakaliit na bansa? Diba?
Okay, kids, very good questions. First of all, yes, China is a leading world emitter of GHG emissions. However, China remains in the so-called non-Annex 1 list. The Annex 1 countries are the main targets for the global climate justice movement worldwide to call on them for reparations. However, I agree with you, kids, that China is in fact a capitalist state at this point in time. For all intents and purposes, it is capitalist. It is pursuing a profit-seeking, state-based economic paradigm. Now, on that basis, it is also very much contributing to the global GHG emissions in the pursuit of its economic interests. Yes, China must be confronted. I agree. That's why it should be a global concerted effort, but not at the level of states alone, because we know that states usually bunch up together. They protect each other's interests. It's an old boys network. All the presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, or whoever you have are part of this agenda. It's the peoples, the masses of the movement of the world that can only change their states by overthrowing them. Lastly, on the point you raised about, I'm sorry.
What Pinoy can do.
Okay, basically, we in Sanlakas, our position is Pinoy cannot do anything. He has no political will. He has no political will. Even if he knows what must be done, there is no will. Therefore, the only solution, my friends, patalsikin si Pinoy.
You talk about changing the system in the Philippines. What do you mean by that? What kind of system do we have to change?
Okay, it's basically the social, economic, political system that we have today. For example, from a neoliberal macroeconomic policy framework that is privatization, liberalization, deregulation, contractualization, and public-private partnership based to one that is people-centered, rights-based, and social justice-oriented, in effect, for the massa. Secondly, political dynasties must go. The Trapo system must go. And even the culture of how we deal in our politics definitely has to be overhauled. And then at the same time, when it comes to a policy framework of the state level that always listens to and abides by the interests of major powers, in this case, let's say U.S. imperialism, when they say we need more bases, more troops in your country, Malacanang always says, yes, Mr. White House, come in and position your troops here, to the detriment of our sovereignty. And that is the reason why we say that this system is basically a damaged system that should have been thrown in the trash can a long time ago. Unfortunately, the system continues to replicate itself every 6 years through elections and every 3 years in the midterm elections. Now, we have to change our way of thinking. That can only be done by raising our consciousness through forums like this. And I've heard Butch's programs before, the Save the Nation program. We need more of such because they freely explain, present, and educate, popularize the issues. I have worked with Efren twice before in issues related not just to the transport sector, but for economic demands that were also linked up to the survival of our transport workers. Now, in this case, that's why we're linking up EPIRA, ODL, climate change, EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation and Agreement, the Trapo issues. I know both of you, kasama Camilo, kasama Kids, you're in the anti-Trapo movement, anti-Paul Dynasty movement. This is exactly what we are fighting for. It has to be at a comprehensive, strategic, and national systemic change agenda. Lastly, it should only be a systemic agenda that is socially viable, progressive, so that all will benefit and not just a few.
Okay, Lakay, one more minor point.
Natutokso tuloy ako sabihin na ibalik ang bagong lipunan sa 2016. Yeah, sabi ni Enoy.
Kay bumbong lahat. Okay, one minor point, last point, Rusty, still on the line of changing the system. No? We've changed system so many times before. No? Inalis na natin yung pamahalaan rito ng mga Kastila. Inalis na rin natin ang pamahalaan rito ng mga Hapon. Si Marcos, inalis na rin natin. Pagpalagay mo na, kasama na natin si Hera. No? Pero, ang problema natin ganun pa rin, palala. Now, we in Philippine Driver Jury Movement, nakikita namin ang problema. Tingnan mo, pansinin mo, mula sa panahon ng Kastila hanggang ngayon, parehong justice system ang gamit natin. Iyon ang problema. Dahil lahat ng issue sa buong bansa, hindi pinaglalabanan sa Kongreso o sa Malacanang o sa police station, sa korte. Doon tayo nayayari. Diba? Kahit ang karapatan natin, nakalita niya sa saligang batas, pwede ba natin i-demand ang karapatan yan? Hindi. Paano natin i-demand? Punta ka sa Husgado. Ihawak ni Mayor ang Husgado. Ano magagawa mo? Nga. Now, tanong mo. Kinoconsider niyo ba yan sa inyong organisasyon ang pagpaira ng sistema ng jury sa bansa?
Thank you, kids. Now, we have discussed this several times before, and I know I've discussed this with you kids. First of all, yes, to a certain degree, that's a correct step forward. However, that's only a tactical step. What we're looking for is strategic change. The system, and I will speak personally now, the system I'm advocating for is what many call a socialist system. Why? Because the capitalist system, since the Spanish period, the American, Japanese, fascist, Marxist dictatorship period, on to Cory, Ramos, Era, Gloria, and now the Pinoy regime, have always been based on a capitalist system. So regardless of who is in Malacanang, whoever is in power, the system will continue to rejuvenate itself and continue its own divisive and contradictory ways. Even if you have a trial by jury setup, if the capitalist system remains in place, then it's only the rich who will decide who goes to jail and who stays out. But if you have a socialist system whereby it is geared toward the benefits and the welfare of a great majority, if not all, from a materialist standpoint, then it will provide for a change in the consciousness and attitudes and values mindset of society as a whole because of that socio-economic based change. I don't know if you may agree with me, but that's the position I carry in terms of a theoretical approach towards systemic change.
Okay. Thank you, Rusty. Can you have some reactions from Professor Butch?
Well, yeah. Thank you, Rusty, for plugging our program. Yes, we do need some changes in the system. And all of what is being taken up dito sa jury system or even climate change as a policy can be taken up as soon as you're able to take out the present regime. And I agree, the present regime will have to be changed. You cannot change the appeal law without a revolution. And the revolution can come in different forms. Revolution of the mind first. But we know what we're replacing. We know what we're changing. And we know, at least in general terms, where we want to go. It is not, you're not going to change the present system just in order to put in a jury system. There's so many other things that are going wrong in our country today. We're not going to take out the whole leadership of this country just so that we can come up with a viable climate change program. Because climate change is a fact. Now, what is not a fact is where it's coming from. This is still being debated by scientists. Many scientists are saying the principal factor in changes in the climate is the activities of our sun. When there are a lot of solar flares and they come in certain periodic times, it has an effect on the behavior of our planet. It has an effect on earthquakes, the intensity of the earthquakes, and even volcanic eruptions. And just recently, I don't know if you know that there has been, because this supposedly comes in 13-year cycles, 12 to 13-year cycles. And we are on the 13th year. And this solar system, according to scientists, I'm not a scientist, I'm just telling you what I've read. This is going to impact on the planet because it has the radiation coming from all of these solar flares. A solar flare, by the way, only one solar flare is equivalent to 5 million megatons of
nuclear explosion.
nuclear bombs. No? 5 million, one solar flare. So you can just imagine several of these or many of these coming within a certain period, how it's going to impact on, of course, the climate of all of these little planets that are orbiting there. Now, has this been made into a fact? No, it's just scientific theory. Just like the amount of carbon that human beings are emitting and causing all of this global warming. All of this will have to be proven. And as time goes on, we will get more and more true scientific data that mankind will finally decide. No? But the fact of the matter in the Philippines is people are going hungry, they're dying because of sickness, they don't have jobs, and we seem to be continuing in this deteriorating situation. Not only are we deteriorating, we're actually disintegrating as a society. Disintegrating geographically, geopolitically, politically, because many of these areas that are suffering are now wanting autonomy. You gave the Bangsamoro a autonomy. No, it's not autonomy that you gave him. It's sovereignty that they have given. And it is not, it should be expected that other sections of our country will demand the same. Yeah. Just that one act alone is going to be destroying and dismembering our country. And no president, whatever popularity he claims to have, has the right to do this. This is against our constitution. And just even on that alone, he should be impeached. But how can you impeach somebody who has the Congress in his pocket, using the DAP, using the PDAP, and using the resources of government? How can you? So the people don't have any other recourse but to take him out. Because, as they say in the universal document that came out that established the United States of America, that where the people who have formed the government and where that government does not perform the mandate that the people have given it, it is the right, it is the duty of the people to replace that government. So we must exercise our right and our duty to replace this government as soon as possible.
Okay, Asa, yan ang question natin. Professor Butch. Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Professor, bago ko tanongin siya, Professor, yung sinasabi kasi ni Secretary Pitilla, iba daw po itong emergency power na ibibigay niya nihilin niya sa Congress para kay Presidente Aquino, compare doon kay Ramos, emergency power. Anong tingin mo ron?
Yun nga sabi ko kanina, alam nyo, hindi ko malaman kung paano silang kukuha ng additional generating power na hindi nila ililipat sa consumer yung gastos.
Added cost.
Maski pa paano mong gagawin, kung gagamitin mo yung pera ng kaban ng bayan, siyempre, kakailanganin bayaran yan. At pag nabayaran, saan mo kukunin ang pambayad kundi sa tao? Okay. Now, pwede nga sabihin, hindi tataas ang cost ng electricity. Hindi nyo makikita sa electricity bill nyo. Pero pwede nilang ipasa yan sa ibang sektor na sasalo. Ang ultimately,
Ipapasa rin.
consumer din ng ano. For example, katulad yung explain ko kay Efren, yung hindi papasa sa Meralco bill mo, pero pwede mong ipasa sa crudo. Sasabihin mo lang sa oil companies, eto, papayagan ko kayo magtaas ng 50 centavos per liter, no? Pero yung 50 centavos na yan, amin yan. No? Pwede mong sabihin yan ilan lang tao kakausapin mo no? So ano mangyayari? Ang taong bayan, hindi na nga tumaas ang Meralco bill ko, pero sinasalukurin natin. Alam niyo po, accountant ako eh. No? Alam po paano nilang tinatago itong mga ganitong klaseng juggling of funds, yung malversation of funds. Alam natin kung paano nila ginagawa yan. Eh. No? Yan si Butch Valdez, maraming ginagawang gimmick yan. No? At alam ng COA, ang problema, yung COA hindi siya titirahin. No? And this is where you sense a conspiracy of all those that are in power, including certain sectors in the private sector, no? To have taken over the government, no? Without the people really understanding and just shouldering the effects of what they're doing. One last point. Ito pong pagbabandera niya ng GDP, nang pumunta sa GDP niya mataas, kaya sinasabi niya sa mga foreign investor, pumasok kayo sa Pilipinas, ang ganda ng GDP namin. Alam niyo po ba yung GDP? Kaya tumataas yan. Kasi lahat ng basic services natin, electricity, gasolina, water, transportation, papasok na ngayon sa healthcare, no? Lahat yan private sector. Now, nakikita nyo naman, wala siyang ginagawa para ibaba ang presyo nito mga ito. As a matter of fact, nung nagtaas ang Meralco noon, anong statement ng Malacanang? The increase daw is reasonable. Kakasabi lang last year ni Noynoy, the increase of Meralco is reasonable. Nung dinala sa Supreme Court, sabi ng Supreme Court, kailangan ibalik nyo sa dati yung presyo. Do you remember this? So here is a situation where this government is in conspiracy with this other view to bring up the prices of all public utilities. What is the effect on your GDP? It goes up. In other words, in our system, the higher the GDP, the more people are dying of hunger. Kaya huwag kayong nag-celebrate that the so-called GDP is going high. This is what they are saying. And Noynoy is telling the investors outside, all of our private sector companies that are in energy, that are in transportation, are all making 200% return on investment. So why don't you come? Because everything is going to be lucrative for you. What is he saying? You come over, I have controlled the situation in such a way that it goes against the people, but it favors private sector. Now this is unconstitutional. This is unconstitutional because pagbigay niya nito, remember, we must have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is not for us. This is not of us. And it was not made by us. It was made by Noynoy Aquino in public-private partnership. Just that PPP alone is the most scary thing that we should have seen in 2010. Na pag pinairal niya to, siguradong maraming mamamatay. And this is exactly what is happening.
Sir Butch, di ba sabihin, sabi, hanggang 2016, abang sindikato itong si Kapag, itong sa buwatan ng COA, sa pamumuno nitong si Pangulong Aquino, ibig sabihin, lulunukin na natin talaga ito. Hanggang walang nangyayari din sa laban ito.
Dapat hindi na tayo umabot ng 2016. Alam niyo po kung bakit? Tinitignan ko lahat ng politiko natin. Lahat. Kasi KBL, Binay, o kung sino man ito mga gustong maging presidente o vice-presidente. Ano po ba ang naririnig ng programa sa kanila? Meron po bang ina-address ang kahirapan ng tao? Meron po ba silang sinasabing programa na aliwas dito sa nangyayari ngayon? Wala eh. Ang sinasabi nila, magnanakaw ito. Pero yung nagsasabing magnanakaw ito, magnanakaw din eh. Na.
Galit kayo magnanakaw. Pero, Sir Butch, as you said while ago, habang ang Kongreso nasa bulsa, daya ni Pangulong Aquino, wala tayong magagawa pare-pareho.
Meron tayong magagawa. Yung sinasabi ni RustI. We did the regime change. And I say, ASAP, actually it should have been yesterday and months before, or maybe a year before. No, we should have made that move. No? We should have also have made the move at the time when we saw that he was bribing senators and congressmen to kick out a Supreme Court justice who was kicked out on the basis of a SALN, no? That instead of putting it in market value, he put it in assessed value, which was what the practice was. Everybody na meron kayong SALN, you never put it in market value, you put it in assessed value. The assessed value was put there by government because the market value fluctuates. We don't know the real market value. But the assessed value is standard because it is the government that puts it there. But they kicked him out because of this. Now, nung nakita natin, at nakita na natin yung pamamaraan, how he did it, how he paid the media, how he paid the congressmen and the senators, then you should have seen already the major writing on the wall na itong taong to, gagawin na lahat ng gagawin niya para maging de facto dictator. And that's exactly what had happened. After that move, how many moves did he make that we can consider against our constitution? Madami na. Madami na. No? Lahat yan, puro against our constitution. There were 7 or 8 counts against him that he blatantly had done against our constitution.
Prof, alagay mo na napalitan si Pinoy. No? Palitan siya. Ano ang garantiya ng mamamayan na yung papalit sa kanya at ang grupo niya ay hindi rin magnanakaw?
Well, alam nyo yung pagnanakaw is for me a symptom a symptom of the system that we allow. For example, yung sinasabi natin dito, pinalitan natin to, pinalitan natin yon, tapos tinanggal na si Marcos. Pero bakit ganyan pa rin ang nangyari? Because we never changed the system. We never changed the system. There was no program we're talking about. We're only looking at who is the magnanakaw. And you took out Gloria because she's a magnanakaw. Now he's going to be taken out because he's a magnanakaw, or he promotes magnanakaw, right? But nobody talks now about the program. What is the program?
Okay, let me put it differently. Pagka ba may nailuklok na bagong Pangulo, siyempre bagong administrasyon, maasahan na ba natin naggagampanan ng COA? Ng ombudsman, yung mga resident COA.
Depende sa atin yan. Depende sa atin yan. Kung ang reason mo na ilalagay mo itong presidente because sasabihin niya tuwid na daan o tuwad na daan, hindi siya katulad ni Noynoy, kapares na si Noynoy, ang sinabi niya, hindi ako magnanakaw, linagay niyo siya. O, hindi ako magnanakaw dahil anak ako ni Cory, linagay mo siya. Yan ang mangyari. Matutuloy natin yan. But, if we demand from all of these candidates a program, what is it that you have, even in general terms, what are you going to do with regard to jobs? What are you going to do with regards to food, to energy? And to this the most debilitating cash outflow we have called the foreign debt service, the onerous and the most onerous and immoral foreign debt service that we're paying. What are you going to do? Now, if they don't have any answer that is specific and categorical, at kung lalaro-laro lang sila sa pamumulitika nila, sipain nyo na. Pero kung meron ka makikita natitindig, itong gagawin ko dahil mukhang pinag-aralan na niya at itong mangyayari agad-agad, no? Baka may chance tayo. Now, when I say this, hindi mo lahat maisasabi, no? Because you need to change and to fix up certain provisions in our Constitution. I agree. But you cannot make Noy do it. If you have a new government, and the new government eventually will call for certain changes in the Constitution, then we debate. Some are calling for parliamentary. Let's debate it out. Some are calling for a change in the judicial system. Let's debate it out. Some are calling for policies on. Let's debate it out. Sooner or later, if we really are honest in wanting to have a new nation, a rebirth of the Philippines, of the Republic of the Philippines, I am sure that the people's sentiments will be voiced out and we will do whatever is right.
Singit ko lang ito, Professor, no? Ewan ko kung natinig mo, si Mayor Duterte ayaw maging presidente pero gusto ng iba. Ang isa sa mga plano niya at gusto niyang gawin, revolutionary government. Abolish ang Congress, abolish ang Senado, gusto mo namin Congress, both houses yan. Abolish lahat, tapos yung daw mga general, bibigyan niya ng malaking sweldo, yung lahat ng korap, aalisin daw niya, papalitan niya ng bago, tapos yung gagawa ng kalokohan, may paglalagyan. Parang gano'n ang gusto niya sabihin. So, pag sinabi ng revolutionary government, wala talaga tayong batas. Pero, may pagbabago kasi nga may mga tao siyang ilalagay na may mga limitasyon ng galaw. Hindi pwedeng mangurap. Dahil ang sinasabi ni Duterte, lumalabas, parang wala na siyang katiwa-tiwala sa lahat na nakapwesto sa ilalim ng saligang batas.
Hindi lang siyang nawawala ng tiwala, tayo din naman, di ba? Siguro naramdaman din ni Duterte na lahat tayo wala ng tiwala sa lahat ng mga ito. And there was also a time that I was already, wala na rin akong tiwala sa judicial system natin, sa Supreme Court. Pero nakita ko, in these last recent months, na ang Supreme Court nakinig sa tao. At hindi lang nakinig, natakot. Natakot sa tao. Hindi ba lahat tayo, sabi natin, wala na mangyayari sa Supreme Court dahil bayaran na yung mga yan, takot na yung mga yan, na-intimidate na, at ang nagluklok sa Chief Justice dyan, si Noy. Hindi ba yung kung sinasabi natin? Tapos napakatagal nitong DAP, ayaw nilang desisyonan. At ang rumors natin naririnig, ginagapang. At marahil nga talagang ginagapang yan. Binibigyan ng mga pera at ino-offeran kung ano-ano. Para lang mag-desisyonan na constitutional yung ginawa ni Noy. Pero sa ferment ng tao, sa mga rallies, sa mga nakita nila na kung pipilitin nilang constitutional natin ang mga to at magkaroon ng revolusyon, palagay ko, yung mga ulo ng mga Korte Suprema ang unang-unang pupugutan. At siguro, naramdaman nila to. Which is good. It might be a term for saying this, but that is what I think they were afraid of. It's their lives. And it's true. Galit na galit ang tao na pag ginawa nila to, karapal na, baka silang mapugutan. They should remember what had happened in the French Revolution. At kanya na-invento yung guillotine. Dahil sobrang daming pinupugutan, napapagod na yung gumaganyan. Nag-invento na sila ng more systemic way of cutting their heads off. What I'm just saying is, pag pinabayaan mo talaga ang tao, there will be a period na talagang magiging bloody at hindi natin gusto nangyari sa atin.
Professor, sa Sanlakas, sabi mo nga, Professor, hindi lang 8 yung mga talagang unconstitution. Napakarami ng violation sa ating batas. Napakarami ng problema ng bayan. Pero kung kukumpara sa ibang bansa, mabait pa rin mga Pilipino, wala pang. Alam mo, sa Middle East, patayan na yan. Sa Middle East, marami ng tumumba. Ganun sila eh. Pero ang tanong ko sa inyo, bakit ang Pilipino hanggang salita lang? Ngayon, bakit ang Pilipino hanggang organization lang? Yung actual na pagkilos, sa isang tunay na pagbabago, bakit hindi nangyayari? Mangyayari ba yun? Ayaw ko ng gulo, pero sukdulan na eh. Yung alam ko yung sasabi mo kayong GDP, iba kasi ang pag-unawa ko doon, kaya lagi ko sinasabi sa radyo, tumataas. Gutom, dumatami sa Pilipinas. Kaya tumataas talaga. So, ayun, yun ang tanong ko. Bakit ganun? Mabalik pa tayo? Hanggang saan ba ang kabaitan ng Pilipino? Kultura ba ng Pilipino talaga ang kabaitan? Hindi na magbabago yun.
Sobrang pasensya siguro. Sobrang pasensya siguro. Ito may nagtako na ako si Professor. Kami sa media, tayo sa media, Prof. Nahirapan na tayo paniwanag yung sinasabi na ni Chairman na GDP. Lagi na nasa balita, gumagan na ang ating ekonomiya. Pero pagpunta mo sa baba, wala kang nararamdaman kung bago. Gutom, di ba? Yung mga mahirap ngayon, lalo naghihirap, no? The present poor are becoming poorer. Yun ang sabi nila. And there's a new group, the new group of poor. May mga bagong grupo na mga mahihirap na nadadagdagan. Yan yung mga problema natin. Meron akong dalawang anak na mga nag-graduate na. Tinatanong ko, yung isa. Sabi ko na, ilan na ba kayong may trabaho doon sa batch mo? Wala pa kami 10. Sabi niya, yung isang anak ko naman, kayo naman, ako, ilan yung may trabaho sa inyo? Tatlo pa lang. Yung nag-graduate last year, yung batch nila, 3 pa lang silang mayroong trabaho.
Ilan sa batch? Ilan sa batch?
Yung batch niya ay mga 49. Yung pinakahuli. 2 pa lang sila may trabaho. Lahat nagkaroon ng trabaho, pero 2 pa lang sila ng trabaho. Diba? Yung iba, nag-aaral na ng caregiver para pupunta na ng America at saka Canada. Mga college graduates na ito. Nag-aaral ng kung ba yung pagtabuhasan. So, yun yung sitwasyon. No? Nanilagtag ko lang kasi talagang wala tayong nakikita ng magandang nangyayari. Tayo nung araw, nakakainom pa tayo ng 6 na beer, di ba? Pupunta ka ng inuman, nakakainom ka pa ng 6 na beer. Nakakapruta ka pa ng masarap-sarap yung crispy pata.
Dahil isa na lang, pag-aaralan mo ba?
Meron ka pang katabi. Meron ka pa katabing may streak. 2 beer na lang, nakakanta ka ng 3, pagpamulot ka na, uwi ka na.
Wala na katabi.
Wala na katabi. Yun yung barometro. Talaga yun yung barometro. At saka nung araw, makakarinig ka pa, pare, ibig tayo mamayang gabi, ako sagot. Mayroon wala na eh.
Turuan na.
Meron tatawag, pero pare, kaya alam mo na, KKB tayo. Meron na yun. Yun yung barometro ng ekonomiya. Di ba kaya, Fred?
Ay.
Oo.
Akala ko yung Pedro Lights ni Kaya.
Ano ko lang, Sir Rusty, ano natin dito yung pinakamabilis na solusyon para mabago lang ang gobyerno?
Yan na nga yung patalsikin.
Paano gagawin?
Kasi kung hindi sa kalsada o marcha sa kalsada, mukhang ang Pilipino masyado ng pagod, masyado ng dala. Kung baga sa ano, sige, gawin niya na lang ang gusto nyo. Tatanggapin na lang namin kung ano gagawin namin. Kanya-kanya discarding na lang tayo. Pinakamahirap na gobyerno to eh.
Our position in Sanlakas is like this. We believe in systemic change through a revolution. But the revolutionary process will take a while because there are certain components that must be undertaken first before we can have a successful revolution. One is to...
Excuse me, if you're saying revolution, are you referring with the military arm of the government?
No, that is a coup d'etat. We do not subscribe to a coup d'etat. That's a right-wing method. Sanlakas is opposed to a right-wing method, including a dictatorship. What we want is to involve the masses in their millions. But to do so, we need to raise their consciousness, educate them, popularize their knowledge, and then organize them through people's organizations, in mass organizations, through the mass movement nationwide, and then mobilize them toward a single direction. That's the capture of state power.
Prestige, I'm sorry tingin ko kasi ang media rin, hawak at kontrolado nito, mga kung ito, nahihirapan tayo sa sinasabi mo, sir.
That is the reason why we need to have our own alternative media devices, so to speak, sources, our own radio stations, TV stations. This newspaper, this is a very good effort. We should maximize it and expand it. Now, this is how we in Sanlakas view it. We can only do so on the basis of uniting the masses. If you want a fast solution, then assassinate the president. But then what will happen? Binay will just take over. It's the system that will remain in place. What we want is systemic change, and you cannot just do this overnight. If you want a very successful revolution, components must be put in place. And that is very painstaking and hard building.
Sa akin po, if I may address. Sa akin naman, maraming methods of change. No? We can go into that whole revolutionary process. No? The other thing is, in studying the Philippines, especially the Philippines, sa akin, if we do away with all of our ideological biases, and concepts, right wing, left wing, if we do away with that and start looking only at the Filipino people and the Republic of the Philippines, and then take away all of that, ang nakikita ko po, there are only two functioning institutions right now in the Philippines. One is the religious sector, and the biggest of which is the Catholic Church. But you must include in the religious sector the Iglesia ni Cristo, all of this. Why do I say this? Because this partly answers your question, Mike. Bakit ayaw kumilos? Because by culture, maybe, and history, we have been a religious people. We are even among the Muslims. Our Muslims are not as militant, as I would say, as the ones that you see right now in the Middle East.
ISIS.
Not the ISIS type, not the fanatic type. As a general, you see them all still referring to that. So that, to me, is one institution. The other institution, which includes very poor Filipino families, by the way, the other institution is the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Those two institutions are intact. Wherever the whole Iglesia ni Cristo, the Catholic Church, and the Protestants, and the Muslims, if you put them all together, and they ask the people to do as one, hindi yung kanya-kanya, as one, palagay ko po, magkakaroon ng malaking pagbabago dahil pag nakita na sumasama lahat yan ng mamamayang Pilipino, susunod na po yung militar. Yung militar po walang pag-iisip na
Kulang kontrahin yung kasi isang putok, dalawang putok, lalo na pagsabog, takot na Pilipino Meron akong gusto ma-initiate yung dalawa. First, disciplinary measure with the military arm of the government, using our military generals na para bigyan todo pasyen at kung kailangan upakan. Second, yung justice system. And the third, yung labagit ng salin. And the fourth, the media. Kung talagang titingnan ito, tingin ko, doon pa lamang sa mga military generals natin ako na talagang kailangan magamit para mapag-labanan itong ginagawa ng administrasyon. Bakit hindi kaya tayo gumawin muna? Kasi sa totoo lang, pag gamitin natin itong military arm natin, itong law enforcers natin, sabi nga sir, isang putok, isang sabog lang, ako na tayo pareho kayo.
Isama mo si Efren sa magsasalita. Efren, tulungan mo si lahat mo. Transport malaki.
Number one ay yung sinasabi natin ng mga pagkilos. At tayo ay galing sa martial law. Napansin po natin, ang mga kalaban na po natin ay mismo kasama natin sa kalsada ng mga nakalipas na panahon. Ngayon, yung strategy natin, alam na nila. Kaya yung part ng pakikibaka natin nun, yung ating pagkilos kung paano natin nilalabanan ang panunungkulan ng hindi tama na pamamahalaan, ay sila na mismo ilan lang naman yan ganito lang naman yan, palabasin mo lang, mga pakaliwa yan ganun po yung mga pagkilos. Pero yung pakikibaka, dahil bago na po ang sistema ng yung tayo ng mga martial boys, ay nabago na, ilang taon na yung nakalipas, bago na yung sistema ng idea ng pakikibaka ng mga kabataan sa ngayon. Kaya kailangan, yun yung sinasabi mo na pag-aaral. Kaya yung pakikibaka, hindi makikita yan na madalian, kundi yung sinasabi natin, yung pag-aaral. At simulan ng pakikibaka ng mga naging karanasan natin ngayon at siyang susunod, yung susunod na ngayon pa lamang kumikilos. Kasi pumasok kasi sa kanilang isipan na katulad namin sa parte naman ng transport, yung climate na sinasabi mo, sa amin naman lahat tumatama yan eh. Di ba? Yung usok, yung mga nasod, etc. kami lumalaka. Yung sinasabi ni Profesor na yung sinasabi niya na yung katarantaduhan ng ating pamahalaan, yung sinasabing yung emergency power ni Presidente, at malinaw na i-convert lamang yung pagduloko sa sambayanan. Halimbawa, yung sa transport, sasabihin natin na, itaas din yung presyo ng langis, kahit na 50 o 1 peso yan. Kailangan yung lahat ng kikitain nyo para doon lang yan, at least nanakaw na yung parte at kami pa rin na magsiservisyo. Yung sinasabi natin na walang plano ang ating pamahalaan, na kailang state of the nation na, hindi man lang nababanggit yung transport. Pero aminin natin ang katotohanan, ang buhay ng ating bansa ay nasa transport. Diba? Dahil pag hindi, yung isda, hindi naman darating sa palengke. Hindi ka naman magiging abogado kung hindi ka makakarating sa eskwelahan eh. Diba? Ganun yung port. Diba? Yung sinasabi natin, kahit na mga media, hindi naman kayo makakapunta dito sa Rembrandt Hotel kung wala kayong sasakyan. Kaya transport pa rin. Pero binabaliwala at niwawalang niya pa ng ating pamahalaan. Kaya ngayon sinasabi natin sa panimula, sa hanay lamang ng transport group, wala nang kabilib-bilib sa ating pamumuno ng ating Pangulo. Ngayon, iisa lamang ang sa lahat ng sektor, iisa lamang naman ang ating tinatawag na idea, yung hindi tama at yung kawalangyaan ng ating pamahalaan, yung pang-aabuso, yung iba't ibang sektor, iisa lang naman ang sinasabi. Di ba? Hindi maganda ang pamahalaan. Madali na yan na pagsama-samahin. Yun yung pagkilos.
No? Hindi mo kasi sinasama dyan yung komunikasyon which is media. Ang reason kung bakit isang karo lang bumuo ng isang trako, which is transportasyon at komunikasyon sa tamang informasyon. Yan ang hindi binibigyan ng pansin sa media. Sinusulit yung transportasyon.
Hindi, nakikita, ang media naman, hindi naman nawawala yan eh. Yung bawat kilos ng bawat sektor, kayo naman nakabantay, nandun yung aming pagtitiwala sa inyo, doon sa pagsuporta ng pakikibaka. Kasi, kung gaano kayo, halimbawa, yung sinabi nga po ni Kalakay, yung dito lamang sa inyo sa media, halimbawa, nagkaroon kayo ng tinatawag, yung parang idea lang to yung party list, ilan ba yung nakakaboto sa inyo? Ilan ba yung dapat na bumoto sa inyo? Dito lamang sa kalooban dito.
Ngayon, nandiyan ka, nandito rin ako, nandiyan tayo lahat. Simulan natin yung transportasyon at komunikasyon sa tamang informasyon.
Nakita naman ninyo yung pagkilos namin. Makikita yan doon sa kanya-kanyang direkta na problema ng bawat sektor. Nakita rin naman ninyo yung kilos namin ng mga nakalipas na panahon doon sa Sentry, doon sa Quezon City, kung paano kumilos ang transport. Ang kailangan lamang, kasi kung minsan, pag kami ang kumilos, sasabihin, ay may mga sip-sip. Di ba? Ang sip-sip. Ganito lang nag-strike kami. Anong sinasabi? Hindi kami kasama dyan. Bakit? Putang na, pinaglalaban niya yung transport eh. Samantala, pinaglalaban po yung busy katapusan. Para magkakasama-sama yun, yung ganun sistema, mismo sa looban ng ating sektor, ay may mga tinatawag na problema. Kaya very importante, yung tunay na nakikibaka, tunay na nakikipaglaban, yung kailangan ng magkaisa at magsama-sama.
Lakay sa may rejoinder na lakay.
Last two na lang.
Okay, sige.
Uli na si Pare Tony kasi alas 11 medyo na tayo.
Ito in line din sa good governance yung hinahanap natin dito, no? Now, kwento ko lang sa inyo yung speech, maiksing speech ni Don Simon. Kaya sabi niya, nung siya in-appoint na mayor ng Quezon City, ang una niya kaagad na naalala, yung mga kasama niya sa kalye, na mga martial babies o martial boys. So, dinala niya sa Quezon City Hall. Dito kanya natin i-apply ang ating prinsipyo pinaglaban sa kalye. Ano nangyari? Aba, sabi nung isa niya kasama, bandang ulit, Mayor, ano ka ba naman? Nung nasa kalye tayo, napapakahirap tayo. Hanggang ngayon, ba't man gusto maghirap pa rin tayo? Ayun. Magprinsipyado yung tao. Ano nangyari? Bago dumating yung eleksyon, kalahati ng mga kasama niya, andun na sa kalaban. Kahit presidente ka, sabi niya, matino ka presidente, matikas ka. Hindi mo kaya patinuin ng bansa. Kaya, ang nakikita natin solusyon dyan, trial by jury.
Anthony. Ikaw naman. Huli na. Hi, Fred.
Nung dumating si President Obama rito, na-introduce po ni Robert Martin yung comment jeep na yan, na siyang kasagutan sa problema po ng transport at kapag sa mga sasakyan ng panlansangan. So, sa parte po ninyo, kahit na nung masasabi.
Doon po sa pakipagharap ni Robert Martin, doon sa presidente ng Amerika, suntok sa buwan yun eh. Wala namang itinulong yun eh.
Ganun ba?
Wala namang gagawin yun eh. Kaya nga po yung pangunang salita ko kanina, hindi na kami umaasa sa ibang katulad sa pamahalaan. Kaya nga po may project kami na ipinatutupad na, hindi lamang, kasi gusto lang kami na ginagawa na, kaysa doon sa nagpapakita sa media. Ang amin pong project ay may Egypt din po kami, may mga diesel din po kami na ibibigay, yung mga phase out. Nagpaplano pa lamang ang gobyerno, may project na kami, dahil hindi na kami umaasa sa gobyerno eh. Ngayon, ang lumalabas po doon, magbibigay kami ng gift na wala kang down payment. Wala kang pera ilalabas, pero tuloy-tuloy yung boundary mo. Pangalawa, ay yung driver ay swelduhan na ng 1,000 a day. Kaya hindi na magbabalasubas. At saka meron din po kami na ipinatutupad na ng memorandum circular na inilabas na ng DOTC, kailangan lahat po ng driver dadaan sa Driver's Academy na magkakaroon sila ng certification. Pag wala silang certification, hindi sila pwede mag-drive sa public utilities. For security, mabuti pa po kami nagpaplano eh. Pero yung gobyerno, walang ginagawa.
Huling hirit si...
Sinisimula na po yun, sinisimula na.
Pastor Diaz, huling hirit huwag ka magprograma.
Wala magkanda po ang usapan natin, pero tama po meron sapagkat yung anumang ano bang hangarin natin sa bansang ito, hindi po matutupad yung gusto nating magkaroon ng magandang gobyerno hanggat ang ating po mga religious group dito sa ating bansa, sapagkat tayo po ang pinakamaraming grupo ng reliyon. Ngayon, kung magkakaisa po, sapagkat ang Catholic Voice, dami ng buhangin sa dagat, yun po ang bilang sa Biblia. At yung iglesia kayo sumusunod, protestante sumusunod, kung yung apat na malaki mag-uusap talaga tutulog sa bansang ito, magtatagumpay po tayo.
Ako sa problema.
Amen. And with that, we'd like to bring to a close.
Imukin natin na lahat ng mga namumuno sa sektor na yun na reliyon. Yung senador.
Okay, tag-isang minuto. Do we still have hope for the country? Unahin natin si Efren. May pag-asa ba tayo? Gusto ko doon tayo na magtapos.
Para sa amin po, sa amin ng transport, wala na kami pag-asa. Kaya kailangan pumunta na tayo sa kalsada at panawagan na ibagsak mo yung ating pamunuan.
Okay. Tapos, do we still have hope?
Habang buhay pa ho tayo, syempre may hope. Yan na lang po ang ating hinahawakan yung tinatawag ng pag-asa. No? Just 30 seconds. Gusto ko lang malaman ng lahat ng nandito. Ang krisis po ng ating bayan, it's much bigger than what you can imagine. Because our crisis, compared to what the world is now facing as a crisis, is very minuscule. Maliit lang po ang problema natin compared to what's going on around the world. Hindi ko po sinasabing hindi natin alam to. But we must address that. Yan pong nangyayari ngayon sa Ukraine at pagpapaharapan ng NATO, Amerikano at saka mga Ruso, is very, very, very serious. These are superpowers that are already confronting each other. Yung pong sa China, at itong paglalagay ng itong mga American warships around China using us as an area dito po sa Southeast Asia is very, very serious that these superpowers are making, because the US and the British are now preparing for World War because the whole system that they have used is now in process of collapse. No? Very, very important po to. Kung hindi, lahat ng sinasabi natin dito, pinag-awayan, pinag-diskusyonan, will become moot and academic.
Rusty, 1 minute. Do you still have hope for the country?
Yes, definitely, Lakay. In fact, I support Efren. We must overthrow the government of Pinoy, change the regime and the system itself. And with Professor Butch, definitely, this is an imperialist world war that's aggressively staring us in the face because of the global capitalist crisis that is full of contradictions. We must be able to confront this. We can only do so by educating ourselves, organizing ourselves, and mobilizing together to confront the system worldwide and even here in the Philippines.
Okay. Thank you, Rusty. Thank you, Professor Butch. Thank you, my friend. And it has been a very worthwhile, informative discussion sa ating pong natapos ngayong umaga. Sa totoo lang, isa ito sa mga pinaka-pasustansya na para kaya natin ginawa dito sa ating Brodkasters Forum. With Professor Butch and of course Rusty at saka si Efren. Salamat po na marami at sa susunod po na Biyernes ulit sa ating Brodkasters Forum. Thank you. Thank you. Rusty.